welcome to the show, Dr. Dan Stickler. What's happening, my man?
It is an awesome day not to be in Miami.
Yeah, is that where you live normally? Or you're
No,
just, oh, okay,
no.
you're just glad you're not there. Okay.
I'm just grateful. I'm grateful I'm here instead of Miami right now.
Where are you located?
Asheville, North Carolina.
Oh, okay, cool. Right on, right on. That's great. I've been to a place there called, I think it was called Boone.
Oh yeah, it's just up north of us.
Yeah, yeah, cool town, cool town. I did a lot of river swimming and a bunch of hippie activities up there, naturally. Okay, man. Well, listen, here's the deal. I want to go into some deep space here today in terms of the brain, mental performance, focus, memory, creativity. I've yet to do an episode that's solely dedicated to nootropics and smart drugs and how to really optimize your brain. This is something I've been working on myself a lot personally,
Yeah.
largely due to the fact that early in life I did a lot of damage to my brain in various ways, many of it pharmacological. Is that the word?
Yeah. Pharmacological. Yeah.
Pharmacological. Okay, see, that's a perfect example of why not to do copious amounts of LSD when you're 14. Um, so we're gonna dive right in. Just briefly though, give us a little bit of your background. I'll of course read your bio and all that, but what's your area of expertise? How did you get involved in this neurohacking and personal development, performance stuff in the first place?
It's. I'll try to make it as short as possible because
Yeah, like
it's a
how do you
comp.
summarize a 40-year career? No.
Right. I went into undergraduate school and I was a neuroscience major, and I was actually planning on becoming a neurosurgeon. Got into medical school, became a little bit disenchanted with the whole medical process, the disease model and the treating disease and not really being about optimizing human function. Still focused on neurosurgery. I actually had matched a position in neurosurgery at Iowa, but I backed out at the last minute because it just didn't resonate well with me. And I went into general surgery, became a gastric bypass surgeon, did about 3,000 gastric bypasses.
Wow. Oh my God, you've seen a lot of guts.
Yeah, quite a bit. And after 10 years of doing that, though, and during that time, I kind of, it was doing surgery was closest to where I could get to where I thought medicine should be as far as, intervening, creating a better quality of life. And then during the process, around 2005, I kind of discovered age management medicine, which was about really optimizing the human performance from a very narrow perspective. And I started expanding on that myself in my practice and decided to step away from surgery because it wasn't really my mission and vision for sure. And just walked away from it one day in 2009 and never went back and went full force into optimizing human potential. And with that, I realized that a systems-based approach was what was needed. So I really focused my attention on a whole different model of medicine because the problem is the sick care system is so, I don't want to say it's flawed because it's appropriate in the appropriate circumstances. When you have an ill person that needs an intervention, it's pretty awesome there. But for generally healthy people or people looking to be better, the system kind of fails them. And so I
Got that right for sure. Preaching to the choir.
so
Yeah,
I
go on.
yeah, I created the model of human potential medicine, and it focuses on really optimizing all these functions, and part of that is the brain. And I did a course on Udemy, a physician's guide to nootropics, a couple of years ago, and that kind of caught the radar of some people. And I interviewed Daniel Schmachtenberger, the co-founder of Neurohacker Collective, on my podcast. And a couple months later, he called me back and he said, "You're one of the few physicians that truly understands nootropics. I'd love to have you on board." And it was just something I couldn't pass up. It was a great opportunity. It's a great company, and that's where we are today.
Oh, awesome, man. Thank you. That's actually a really good summary. Yeah, I always say if I get hit by a car, please take me to the hospital and have someone patch me back together. But if I have headaches or gas or any other like random human problem, I'm not going to a conventional allopathic doctor. That would be like the very last step when I'm on my deathbed or something. So I appreciate that whole approach. So let's dive right into some deep water then, because I know we have a limited amount of time with you. I value your time and that of the listeners, and I want to just like cover some hardcore stuff here. And I am like 100% a bona fide, unabashed fan of Qualia, the flagship product that Neurohacker Collective makes, and just the whole, like you said, the whole company and the brand, the vision. I'm just fully into it. My interactions with you guys have been great so far, which is why I really wanted to have you on. It's just like I have a feeling that it's going to become a household name in the biohacking and health communities and anti-aging and all that stuff. So I'm super stoked to talk to a person that really knows their shit here. So how do you define the mind versus the brain?
Oh, geez. Okay.
There goes an hour and a half podcast right there.
Yeah, really. I mean, that's you're getting into philosophies here.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, just from zooming out in a very broad sense, because I have my own interpretation of those things. It's sort of, I'll give you mine. Okay, maybe that'll help frame it and see if you agree or disagree. To me, the brain is more like a radio receiver, and the mind is sort of this universal transmitter that is transmitting data to all of the brains, right? And so it's like I work on optimizing my brain, but that's more of a physiological thing, whereas the mind is more my thought patterns and the programming that goes into the brain. To me, the brain's like, I guess, yeah, the best way to say to my interpretation is kind of a receiver. Would you agree, or would you contextualize it in a similar way, or do you have a different take on it?
I do. And let's put it this way. I don't feel like consciousness is part of the biology. I think it's separate from the biology. And I look at the carbon-based system of the human being as the vehicle to interact and express that consciousness and experience that consciousness. And so I do see that the brain itself is the biologic piece, but it's also integrated well with the mind aspect of it. So, we have the mind, the consciousness, and just like driving a car, if you were locked in a car and couldn't get out of the car, and the only way you could interact with other people is through that vehicle of the car. I mean, you can flash your lights, honk your horns, hit the windshield wipers. You're limited, even though you inside that car have a whole different potential. But you can't express that, you can't experience it necessarily without that vehicle, and that vehicle is the body. So you can't, and a lot of people will focus on optimizing just that consciousness piece and neglect the body piece. I see a lot of these people that are about expanding consciousness and everything, and they're some of the unhealthiest physical beings I've ever seen.
Like the spaced out new age vegans that are like living on glucose.
Right.
No offense to vegans, I'm just saying, I know in my vegetarian past, I was like so neurotic when I wasn't getting enough healthy fats in my system, just as a, ground level entry point. So carry on.
Yeah, so I think that there needs to be a focus on optimizing that vehicle. I mean, do you want to supercharge that car, or do you want to be driving a Ferrari, or do you want to be driving a Kia? Not to offend anybody that drives a Kia, especially here in Nashville, but it's either that or a one of those, the Foresters. Everybody has one of those Subaru Foresters.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So, but that's the whole idea. I mean, I'm about enhancing what we are, and we have all these tools, these great tools, but they're relegated to disease model. And in human potential medicine, we look at it and say, how can we be smarter? How can we be stronger? How can we be leaner? All of this is within the realms of neurohacking and biohacking in general.
Awesome. I totally am on board with that. I think what I was getting at is that I too sort of have a view that the body is the car that carries your soul or your spirit or your consciousness around. And this, to me, has been proven subjectively, not by something I read in a book or going to see a guru, but just I've had out-of-body experiences, or just, I constantly have these hits of intuition that border on being telepathic. It's just like, I'm just used to it now. I don't even go, oh my God, wow, I was just thinking of that person and then they called me. It's just kind of like nonstop. I was at a party the other night and I met this guy. He was a graphic designer. He didn't tell me anything about his work. He just said, yeah, I do graphic design. I was like, wow, that's awesome. I hire graphic designers. Let's keep talking. Maybe there's some synergy there. And he said, well, man, I work in more of the corporate field. I'd love to do some more creative stuff. I'm working toward doing that, but right now my work is very much based in advertising. And I said, just immediately, just right away, I said, oh, what do you like, designing Snickers wrappers or something? And he looks at me, he goes, dude, what?
Yeah.
He goes, I work for Mars. That's my job, And it was just, he was like tripping. I go, yeah, that's just, 20 years of meditation will do that to you. But in other words, that wasn't my brain that was able to tap into some other realm of information, right? That information exists, that this guy works for Mars and designs Snickers wrappers. Why, of all words that would come out of my mouth just instantaneously, would it be the exact company he works for and what he does for a job? It's not like I have some special ability. It's just the brain. I think if you give it the proper, as you said, the proper nutrition and the proper setting, and you optimize the physiology, the brain really has the ability to tap into that universal mind and consciousness, which is just so fun and fascinating to me.
Well, and
So,
you look at different things that people can accomplish. I mean, you have these people with autistic spectrum that can memorize things that are unreal. I mean, they're using a brain. They're using the same physiologic organ that we use. Why are they able to tap into that and we can't? You look at people that can deadlift a 4,000-pound car off a child that's trapped. And you say, well, that's impossible. It can't be done. And yet it happens. We look at people with end-stage cancer that all of a sudden are cured. I don't see these as miracles. I see these as we've tapped into something in the collective, in the consciousness, in the biology that gives us that potential. That potential's always been there. Just how do we tap into that?
right. Awesome, man. All right. Well, let's talk about how we do that. So, going right into the nootropic and smart drug piece, what is, because a lot of my listeners are really new to the biohacking stuff. I mean, I get messages on Instagram and stuff, and they're like, what's a medicinal mushroom? I'm like, oh, this is great. It's like there's so much to do. I mean, there's so much to share with people. It's exciting. I'm sure some listeners are already, seasoned biohackers, but for someone who doesn't know what the hell I'm even talking about, what is a nootropic and what's the difference between that and a smart drug?
Well, that's also one of those definitions that vary across the board. I mean, nootropics are more neurochemicals, herbals that are designed in some way to enhance cognitive function. Whereas, and some people classify some of the smart drugs in the category of nootropics as well. And I tend to group those as well. I think, the end goal is the same, and we're looking at some input. So the input is the nootropic that's designed to enhance an outcome that is desired. So it doesn't matter if it's a pharmaceutical or a mushroom or what it is, we're putting an input into the system to get a certain output. So, I have all of these people that really focus on natural versus synthetic, and I don't look at things that way. I look at, we are a system and we have inputs and we have outputs. And those inputs, if they match the output without the side effects that are undesirable, then it's a positive thing for the system. So it's more of that approach of looking at ourselves as a system. And some people have argued that, well, the more natural products have been tested over evolutionary bounds and things like that. But you also have to remember that we are not, from an epigenetic standpoint, the same organism we were 12,000 years ago. We've had adaptations to changing environments and everything like that makes it so that as we adapt and thrive, we develop these adaptations to really thrive in the new environments that we're experiencing.
Oh, dude. All right. This is great. You just sparked like a million thoughts in my head. My whole I have you can't see, but I have my Evernote, notes that are very detailed, which I always have there as a guide, but then one sentence can take me off on an hour and a half tangent with a guest. So, we'll see how that goes. Okay. Here's my thing. So you're saying, let's just generalize the term nootropic and just say whether it's synthetic or comes from a plant, somewhere down the line. Let's just call those things that are cognitive enhancing compounds, right? Essentially.
Yeah.
Whereas some people will break them up. Oh, a nootropic is only herbs and mushrooms and things like that, and a smart drug is a synthetic that's manufactured in a lab somewhere in the backwoods of China, right?
Right.
So I'm cool with that framework so far. The thing that just sparked my interest was, I have so many people that are like terrified of taking a smart drug, say like one of the racetams or modafinil, for example, and they'll like even clients and friends, and they'll grill me about the supposed dangers, and meanwhile there's like no records of anyone ever being injured, and they're so paranoid of trying something like that, but they'll go to like Rite Aid or CVS and buy Advil or Tylenol or any number of different over-the-counter pharmaceuticals, essentially. And if you read the side effects of any of those things, from cough syrups to laxatives to PMS medication, I mean, any of the shit you find at the drugstore, and the side effects are like, may cause suicidal thoughts, rectal bleeding. I mean, it's just like the stuff that we're used to taking because we've been indoctrinated by advertising from big pharma is so much more dangerous and potentially detrimental than any smart drug I've ever heard of. What's your take on that? Because you mentioned like, well, we don't live in the natural world anymore. So if your thing is like, oh, I get all my vitamins from food and all the nootropics from just Ayurvedic herbs or Chinese herbs, it's like, yeah, well, that might have worked 10,000 years ago, but I'm surrounded by EMFs and I go in airplanes, and we live in a completely artificial world that's disconnected from nature. So my approach is like, you got to attack this shit with something unnatural to really move the needle. What's your take on that?
Well, I think people get into a cognitive bias with all of that. I mean, they really promote being natural and everything, but they're riding in airplanes and cars instead of riding horses. They're using some form of artificial light rather than using candles or fire or something like that. So I think it's a cognitive bias that you get, and it's kind of a collective consciousness too. I mean, you think about during the time of Columbus, prior to him sailing to the Americas, world exploration was almost at a standstill because we thought that the collective was that the world was flat. There was a group of people that didn't agree.
A lot of people on Twitter still think that.
They still think it, yeah. But he made the trip and he came back, and the collective changed at that point. It's like Roger Bannister running the 4-minute mile. It was impossible physiologically for a human being to run the 4-minute mile. That was the thought. He ran it. Next thing you know, within the next 2 years, 20 people ran a 4-minute mile. So it's more of just changing that collective of what's good, what's bad. Nietzsche talked about the revolutions of, being holy is good. Prior to that, being obese and royalty was good. So the definitions change based on the collective. And I think what we're looking at here is that we have such faith in the medical systems and the regulatory agencies that we accept it without question, rather than looking at what makes sense. I mean, when I started in surgery, we were basically removing the entire chest for breast cancer when I was in residency. And during residency, we suddenly discovered, wow, we could like take out the lump and take out a little lymph node and not maim this person for the rest of their life. And so why were we doing it that way? Because that's the way it's always been done. Nobody ever really questioned it, and nobody wanted to take the chance on doing something that was outside of the standard of care. So I think it's more of just, we have to have those pioneers that go out there and kind of lead the way and lead the change, and shifting that consciousness in little pieces.
Yeah, cool. I love that, man. Before we dig into, I want to get into some specific compounds and just the different sort of, mental components of performance. But before I forget, because I really don't want to forget this, what's your take on modafinil? I've interviewed a lot of people and asked them that, like Dr. Andrew Hill, who's the guy that he's been on my show, and I get neurofeedback at his place, Peak Brain LA, and he's like very anti-modafinil. He took it and had some horrible reaction and thinks it's quite dangerous. I myself have taken it for, I don't know, probably 3 years off and on. If I'm really tired, or if I'm going to go travel on a plane, or if I just know I need to just focus one day and record 5 podcasts, I think it's like the God's gift to the brain, like when it's needed for myself. Do you have any opinion on that particular compound and the possible side effects or dangers or any of that?
Yeah, I have some people on modafinil. I think in certain groups it works really well. I mean, depending on the outcome you're trying to achieve and depending on the reaction that the person has to it. I used to do all this weight loss stuff, and I stepped away from it because I said nothing works. No, there is no perfect human diet. There is not a perfect surgery that creates this outcome. And what I realized when I started getting into more genetic-based data back in 2007 is over time, I got back into weight loss because I realized there is a perfect human diet, but it's the individual's perfect diet. It's not a perfect diet for the human collective. It is all of our genes are a migration of all these different regions. So we've adapted to different regions, different dietary patterns, different medicines that help support the environment that we came from, but now we're in a new environment. So we have to adjust the environment to accommodate that. So we adjust our dietary pattern to eat less saturated fat for certain people with an ApoE4. We look at things like lactose tolerance. We migrated to Europe, and those people tend to have tolerance of lactose. But we have to adjust our environment to really help to accommodate the genes that we've been dealt over time. I mean, genes are certainly not our destiny. We have that epigenetic aspect, but there's certain pieces of it that we can really optimize our outcomes by matching what we're kind of programmed and environmentally supposed to be doing. This happens the same with nootropics. I find all the time. I mean, some people can't tolerate acetylcholine. Some people don't do well with Adderall. Some people don't do well with modafinil. Some people have very negative reactions to racetams, whereas you have other people that have really outstanding results. And I think it comes down to really understanding that we're all individual, and that's what neurohacking is about. Biohacking in general, it's that N equals 1. And I think that's where we're going. We've got all these quantified self devices now, these wearables where we can actually track objectively what we're experiencing. I mean, if you want to know, is this supplement helping my sleep and stress? You monitor HRV and your sleep patterns over a 30-day period while you're taking it. You don't have to go subjective and say, yeah, I think I'm sleeping better or my stress level's lower. You can actually start looking at HRV. You can start looking at your sleep patterns with these wearables. So, we've got some great bioinformatics out there now, and these biohackers and the neurohackers, I mean, they're really going after this, and this is the next phase, this next evolution of the human being, is getting into these N equals 1 and really finding out what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, you're so right. I found that working with friends and clients in terms of nootropics specifically, I'm always shocked at the completely different reactions that people have. I mean, speaking of modafinil, and I have one more question about that too, but I've given that to people and I say, hey, just really go easy. Like, I never take more than a quarter of I think it's a 200 milligram tablet. I mean, and even I'll do usually an eighth. I'll take a quarter and then break that in half because it's too stimulating. Like, I don't need that much help. You know what I mean? But I've given it to friends. I say, okay, take a quarter, and they don't feel anything. Then they take a half. Then they take a whole one, and they're like, nah, I didn't notice it. And then other people have taken a half, and they're like, man, I felt great, but the next day I was suicidal. I'm just like, it's just so weird how they do affect people differently. Even the racetams, like piracetam, I literally take it by the tablespoon in water. If I do public speaking, I'll have a bottle of water. I'll put a heaping tablespoon of piracetam in it, and I'll sip it all day or all night. I feel amazing. My memory recall is insane. I mean, it's my word recall, my just general acuity, verbal acuity is just so much. It's just so noticeably enhanced by that. But I've given it to other people, and they either don't feel it or they feel super wired or whatever. It's so bizarre. I guess you just have to experiment, like you said, and self-quantify to determine what works for you and what doesn't. Back to modafinil, and I don't know that you know the answer to this, but do you know the mechanism by which it operates? I know that it's, from what I understand, was put on the market for narcolepsy, and even the brand that I use is called Mode Alert. I get it from India. It's in the store on my website, actually. And so it's meant to make you alert, which, goddamn it does. I mean, if you have I use it on long drives. I just drove up to Tahoe, and it's like, I didn't even notice. I was like, oh, I'm here. Wow. It's just like, it puts you in this, hyperspace, but I really don't know the mechanism by which it functions in the brain. Do you happen to?
Well, they're not fully into, there's a lot of theories on what's actually happening, and they don't have an exact mechanism for modafinil right now. One thing that I do notice in the research is that there seems to be this, things like Adderall and some of the more amphetamine-derived medications, they tend to activate everything in the brain simultaneously. So they kind of turn everything up. And so that's why some people have very negative experiences with them and some people have very positive. But the modafinil seems to kind of sit in the background and wait to see what you want to use. So are you focused on being alert, then it kind of upregulates that level there. Are you focused on, are you want to concentrate and really get something done, tends to upregulate that without having to upregulate everything at once. That's just the experience that I've had with it, and what I've read in the research is very similar to that, especially in some of the QEEG studies that have been done on it. We haven't actually done any QEEGs on people with that. We've done QEEGs on people with Qualia and found some very good results with that. And it'd be interesting to kind of compare that with those. The problem is, we're dealing with a scheduled drug, which is the modafinil. And, when it gets into the racetams and things like that, I mean, they're research chemicals. So from a medical standpoint, I have to say I can't recommend people using them because they're research chemicals. They're not approved for human use. I mean,
no one's funding studies. The weird thing about modafinil to me that I find so fascinating is that it's stimulating in a way, like you said. I like how you said it's a self-directed compound where your intention sort of dictates your experience to a degree. I would agree with that. What's strange about it is that it's invented for narcolepsy. It definitely will keep you awake if you want to stay awake. But I also take it and get on a plane and fall asleep for 4 hours. Like it's not an amphetamine. I mean, I've taken copious amounts of crystal meth. I've smoked crack. Like I have a really sordid past and a lot of experience with illicit drugs that are very dangerous and toxic, and I would not recommend to my worst enemy. Hitler could be reincarnated. I would not suggest that he tries crystal meth, put it that way. But you're not sleeping for 48 hours on that. I mean, I've never tried Adderall, but I've seen people on it, and it's very reminiscent of someone on crystal meth. Like the big pupils, like psychosis, acting really weird, overly talkative, taking radios apart, never putting them back together, that kind of thing. But I'm halfway joking, but not really. With modafinil, I mean, I'll take it and then forget that I took it, and I'll meditate for 30 minutes, and I'll have this beautifully relaxed, transcendent experience, and then wake up and be like, okay, let me answer 40 emails in 5 minutes. It's just like it's a really weird compound. The other thing that's strange about it to me is that I've proven to myself that it's non-addictive, and I know that because I'm extremely prone to addiction. Like it took me 15 years to quit smoking cigarettes. I mean, I've been addicted to opiates, I've been addicted to cocaine, to alcohol, just about any substance you can get addicted to. I've been a daily user and really worked. I'm 20 years, almost 21 years sober now, thank God, but I've really struggled with addiction in my life. It was a struggle for, my whole adolescence. And so I know that there's certain things that I can't touch, or I sort of awaken the sleeping giant, so to speak, and it's just non-negotiable. I 100% will not have a glass of wine because I've already tried that for 15 years of like, oh, let me just have one, and then I end up in handcuffs. With modafinil, I actually will forget about it for weeks, and I'm not a guy that forgets about something that changes your consciousness. If I find something that gets you high, I start doing it every day, and that's all I think about, and it starts controlling my entire life. So that's what's weird with modafinil. I've never heard of anyone becoming addicted to it, even though it has a very noticeable impact on your mind.
The one thing I do find with modafinil, though, is there's not much euphoria associated with it. It's a get shit done kind of thing. It's one of those ones that you take when you've got something you want to really focus on and get out of the way. It's actually banned by WADA for sports performance even. So it is really? It's a very focused drug.
Yeah.
And I have I know one physician that she has to take 200 milligrams just to get an effect with it,
Wow.
but she likes it,
Yeah.
and then she can't sleep, so she's got to take something to help her sleep at night. Because so one thing I find with modafinil is that, man, if you don't take it before like 6 in the morning, you're going to be up until about 2 a.m. But even though you get like a short sleep that night, you wake up the next day and you feel like you've slept a full course. It's kind of a strange drug the way it works, and I have not seen any addiction with it. I mean, and I think it's because it doesn't really provide a euphoria. People are taking it for very directed uses in most cases.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I agree. It's not like, oh my God, I feel tingly. And I mean, you can get higher from holotropic breathing than you can modafinil for sure. So that's interesting. Okay, so I want to start digging into some other stuff here then. And thank you for, giving me your feedback on that. Because that particular compound is just fascinating to me. And there's just, I don't know, I think there's so much benefit to be had there for specific purposes, like you said. So we've got a few different areas of performance. We have positive cognition, right? So focus, attention, concentration, computation, processing speed, analysis, synthesis, and creativity. So that's all brain stuff, right? Then you have sort of the negative cognitive, which would be brain fog, or the opposite of that, essentially brain fog, distraction, inability to focus. What are some things that help with the positive cognition, and what are some things that encourage negative effects on your cognition?
Well, I kind of take a little bit different approach, because what my understanding of what the work I've done with clients and the research on the brain is that the brain strives for homeostasis. We can kick it out of homeostasis, and it's usually from some lifestyle aspect, or could be in our genetics or something like that. But there's something that is driving it outside of that homeostatic state. And when we try to focus on one outcome, if you say, I want to learn faster. We saw this with the DARPA research on the snipers, where they put the transcranial electrical stimulation on them, and they accelerated their learning rapidly over the people that didn't have that. But what they found is a compensatory loss of automaticity of those functions. So the brain will, if you're trying to enhance something, you're going to sacrifice in other areas. And I found this with just about everything that we do to try to enhance some aspect of the brain, that it will drive itself to that homeostatic state. So what I really like, the approach I really like, is to boost intelligence. Don't go for boosting one specific category of cognitive function. Boost the brain. Focus on the brain as a full system. And how do you do that? So what steps do you take to get there? And the steps are, okay, well, I want to provide all the micronutrients. I want to provide adequate blood flow. I want to provide adequate anti-inflammatories, because if we upregulate some metabolic process like we do with Adderall or Modafinil, we need to be able to mitigate that inflammation that's going to be created by increased metabolism. We also need to be able to clear the metabolic byproducts. So if you're taking something that's really boosting like the firing of the neurons in the brain, and you deplete acetylcholine, well, if you're not feeding acetylcholine into the system because you don't have adequate blood flow to the brain, or because you don't have adequate micronutrient cofactors that are going into that, or you don't have enough acetylcholine, you're choline deficient, then you're upregulating these processes and the brain burns out, and it's not able to sustain that. But what we find is when we provide all of this kind of full systems approach to upregulation of intelligence, we find a settling out of the brainwave patterns. So we see this on QEEG, where somebody may be ADD and they've got all this frontal alpha activity, and they've got normal beta in other areas of the brain, and you bring them into homeostasis and the alpha comes down without affecting the beta. And yet the same ingredients can take somebody with high beta, bring them down to average, or let's say low beta, and it brings them up without affecting the alpha in the frontal. So, the whole idea is to really focus on a homeostasis pattern rather than trying to specifically enhance one state. because when that brain is working together, when it's firing on all cylinders with this stuff, you can really achieve some amazing outcomes with it.
Awesome. That totally makes sense. Yeah, I guess some of us really like to compartmentalize the different aspects. Like, okay, now I want to be in a creative flow state. Then I want to be able to control being hyper focused, and
Yeah.
the high performing people that are after these sort of results tend to, I think, segregate them rather than just saying, hey, how do we just get overall health into our brain? And I like how you frame that as just like, let's increase intelligence, because does not intelligence include all of those aspects of performance, whether it be the emotional, creative side, the left and right hemispheres, I guess you could say, in like a broad sense, right?
Yeah, right.
Cool. Okay, I love that approach. All right, awesome. So, I struggle sometimes when I talk to someone that is associated with a company such as you. You have a couple different things going on. One of them being Neurohacker Collective, and I never want to seem like a shill for a brand, or that I'm doing like an infomercial. But when I find shit that works, I like to find the people that are behind it and that can really speak on it. And I've experimented with all sorts of different compounds and nootropics and smart drugs, and I don't want to like name check them because I think I found something that's the best so far for me, which is Qualia. So I'm not going to like put other things down, but there's a lot of stuff on the market that I've been into for, I don't know, the past 4 or 5 years, and I've seen effects from it. But from the first like 3 days that I started on the Qualia regimen, the 2 different bottles, I just like, my brain just lit up, just on fire, like absolutely quantifiable results. So I'm really curious as to how that particular product came to be, and then I'd like to dissect some of the ingredients and just talk about what their general benefits are, because I noticed that I recognize most of the things in Qualia, and in order to get those compounds I would have to take like 5 other products to kind of stack those up. So how would you describe Qualia just generally to start with? Like, what's it all about?
Well, I think it'd be a good idea for me to tell you how I actually got involved with them.
Oh, cool. Okay, let's do that.
So I was, I'm just running my concierge medical practice. So I have that going. It's about human performance, and part of that is that we do a lot of cognitive enhancement. We use a lot of supplements for cognitive enhancement over time, and we've tried them all. We've tried all these ones that are marketed. These over-the-counter supplement enhancements that. We would get about 50-50. So 50% of the people would say, hey, I had a very positive response. 50% of the people would say I either had no response or a negative response. And then one day last year, one of my clients called me and said, hey, I found this stuff called Qualia, and it looks pretty awesome. And I said, well, send me the information on it. So they sent me the information on it, and about 6 months earlier, I'd been trying to get a nootropic powder put together, and it had 14 different ingredients, and all 14 of them were in the Qualia. I had to bail on it because nobody could flavor it. I didn't want to take a bunch of pills, and I wanted it to be a powder that we could just mix with a drink and drink it. Number 1 flavor house in the country rejected me. They sent my money back. They said, we've never been able to not flavor something, but this is it. And
Yeah.
So I gave up on that, and then I'm looking at this and I'm like, wow, this is just about everything in it, because I had taken that approach of looking at the whole system. We got to boost blood flow, we've got to boost precursors, all of this. And so I was fascinated by it. So I started, and even before I took it, I actually recommended it to some of my clients, and I was getting about 95% positive approval of it. I mean, these people, I'd gone from 50-50 to a 95%, and I thought, this is really bizarre. So I called the company, I called Neurohacker, and I said, I want to talk to the person who's responsible for developing this and interview them on my show. And so I got on the podcast with Daniel Schmachtenberger. We spent 5 minutes talking about Qualia, and the other 45 minutes talking about systems approaches to health and all of this. So I found somebody who was like-minded like me, and we had great conversations. And then about 3 months, or no, about a month later, he calls me up and he said, we're looking for a medical director, and your experience with creating the nootropics course and your background in this, really like to have you on board. And I really didn't have much time at that point. I had other things going on, but because the company was just so amazing, I said, this is an opportunity I don't want to pass up. So I signed on board with them. And I mean, the more I get into the company, the more I understand that philosophically, they're just an amazing company. I mean, they're a conscious business for sure. And their approach to creating the nootropic, I mean, they spent 3 years researching the interactions of every one of these. I mean, I'll call Daniel up and I'll say, how many research articles do you have on this one? He's got like 180 research articles on each one of them, and he knows it down deep and how they interact with each other. So every one of the 42 ingredients, we know how it interacts with every one of the other ingredients, which is something you don't see. I mean, most nootropics, they would say, hey, this shit works for memory, let's throw that in. And this one, there's studies that show that it works really well for attention, let's throw that in there. And you get this mix of stuff that makes no sense. And that's the way we all were. When we're going to the gym and we're bodybuilding, we just say, hey, I want to take this supplement because it's been shown to increase muscle mass. Well, we don't look at how it interacts with other things or the mechanism by which it's actually working. So Neurohacker had taken that whole concept, that whole systems-based approach, and put it together in a way that just blew me away. And I see the effectiveness of it in the clinical practice, which is just amazing.
Yeah, cool. Well said. Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of companies do miss. It's like, they take 5 things that are good for you and throw them together without ever really considering, like, well, do they, even if it's not harmful, do they cancel each other out?
Right.
Or just you put 2 things together. That's why I always tell people, like, to filter their shower water. It's like, well, yeah, tap water's safe. The city told me it's safe. I go, yeah, but they're not testing when it turns into a gas. And you're mixing those 4,000 chemicals in the tap water, then turning them into a hot gas that you're inhaling for 20 minutes every morning, So there is a lot to be said about when you start combining these different things to the point of, not only being ineffective, but maybe not serving you. So,
well, the other thing that you have to pay attention to as well is, and they're really good about this. Neurohacker's really good. They have the Neurohacker guide, which you can download when you go to their website, but they talk about the lifestyle components. So they're talking about the importance of sleep, the importance of community, the importance of air filters, all of this. This is neurohacking. And it's not about just taking some input and putting it into the system. It's about living this whole lifestyle and creating a whole biosphere that is conducive for positive outcomes.
Well,
And
you just described the purpose of this show is like talking to experts like you and piecing together the different elements of a lifestyle, from meditation and shamanic breathing to ice baths to cryotherapy to saunas to psychotherapy and psychology and self-help and personal development and the physical, because you're so right. And I think that's why I resonate with the Neurohacker Collective too, is that it's not just like, oh, here, buy this pill and it's going to fix you. It's like, no vitamin or supplement is going to do shit if you're not sleeping and if you're drinking crappy water and you have no intimate, loving relationships in your life and you still resent your parents. And you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
there's just, it's got to be a systems approach or it just simply doesn't work. You
right.
can't isolate one particular component of your lifestyle. And so, yeah, I'm totally on board with that. And it literally is the purpose of this show, is to piece people like you together. So maybe someone has their spiritual life totally dialed in, but their cognition's a bit foggy because they used aspartame and MSG for 25 years. And now they have a clean diet, but they're still having the mental repercussions of that toxicity, so something like they just need to add in something like Qualia, like boom, turns the neurons on and they're good to go. We're all sort of like always finding that balance, I guess. In terms of some of the compounds, I'd like to go into just a few of those and touch on them lightly, because as you said, I think like every single thing I could personally think of that would improve mental performance is in Qualia. The first one being there are a few different, it seems a couple, if not a few different racetams.
Well, there's really only the Noopept is really the only
okay.
Yeah. And
is that
you've got
a racetam? Because I
no,
okay,
no, it's not. It's a peptide, and
okay.
And I mean, there's nootropic compounds that are in the whole the nootropic category, I guess, of the neurochemicals. You've got huperzine A, you've got vinpocetine, theobromine, those kind of things in there that are considered nootropics. But all of these also interact with other things. So they may be increasing blood flow. They may be functioning as adaptogens. So most of the products have multiple mechanisms of action, let's say. But the Noopept is really the only one that's in there that is really a peptide, not really a racetam, but it's considered a nootropic compound, I guess.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Got that. And then I noticed there's something in there called PQQ, which I could never pronounce the long form of that, but that's something that I get in a product from Bulletproof called Unfair Advantage, and they're these little ampules of this sort of syrup that's got a little CoQ10 and a pretty decent dose of this active PQQ, and that, like, to me was one of those ones immediately I was like, whoa, shit, I actually feel this like mental and physical energy. What's up with PQQ? Do you know anything about that?
It works through different mechanisms. I mean, one of the mechanisms is it's really kind of an antioxidant in a sense. So it's working through antioxidant mechanisms. You've got neuroprotection, you've got nerve growth factor synthesis. It actually will regulate the NMDA glutamate receptor, so activating an activating neurotransmitter. It's modifying the receptor activity in that regard. So there are different mechanisms of action. How is it actually working? We don't know that. So we're again looking at this from an overall 30,000 foot view, looking down and saying, okay, this is interacting well with this. This is creating this kind of response. And, I can't tell you that we know exactly what each of these products is doing by itself.
Right.
And in fact, I can't imagine one product working by itself. I mean, all of these products interact with each other. And I don't think that each of these products could be broken down into saying, oh, this is the one that's creating this outcome. I mean, BioPQQ, a lot of the researchers are kind of down on it because there's not enough research behind it. But then a lot of the, public health community, they're really supporting it. The studies on it are varied, but in general, it looks like it's a very good product overall as far as the antioxidant effects, the NMDA receptor modifications, and those kind of things. But those also work. It's great that you can modify a glutamate receptor, but if you're not having adequate glutamate, it doesn't matter. So you've got to look at it from those perspectives as well.
Right. Okay. And then another thing that I've noticed is just if I'm taking an abundance of bioavailable B vitamins, I tend to feel really good. And I've noticed that in Qualia, there's like a shit ton of B vitamins. There's like, let me see, I think I wrote it down here. There's all the B6, B12, there's like all of those B vitamins that a lot of us tend to be deficient in. And even if I take like not even a great B vitamin, I still feel it. It seems that that's something that the brain really needs in order to function. And when I was a vegetarian, I don't think I was getting, I don't know, maybe no B vitamins or very little, and I was like practically brain dead.
It's hard to get B vitamins, adequate amounts of them. I mean, if you look at, Bruce Ames did a really great job with looking at this micronutrient triage system in the body and the amount of deficiencies that we see in these micronutrients in the body, not only in the vitamins, but also in the minerals. And even in people taking multivitamins, and there's certain vitamins and minerals that you can't get adequate amounts of or absorb adequate amounts of in a multivitamin, like vitamin D or choline. Even people taking multivitamins tend to be deficient. And you're talking about, choline deficiency running like 60% of the population, which is one thing I would never want to be deficient in is choline. It's just too important. You look at B6. B6 is a very common deficiency in people that don't take a multivitamin. Usually with a good multivitamin, you can get enough B6. The other thing is B12. I mean, B12 is one of those things that most multivitamins have cyanocobalamin. Can't be used like methylcobalamin can be used, especially on an oral intake. those are things that are cofactors in a lot of functions in the body. I mean, hundreds of enzymatic reactions that require these cofactors in order to work. And our body has this amazing ability to triage these micronutrients and saying, okay, well, this is really good for the stuff we need right now, but it's also really good for long-term health and, DNA repair and all of this. But if we're getting low, it kind of says, well, forget about the long-term stuff. Let's focus on what we need it for right now and shunt it that way. And so in the background, you're getting all this DNA damage that's not being repaired. So I'm a big fan of a multivitamin, just a low-dose multivitamin every day. And then the other nutrients that you take are really good for just specific outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Now, the great thing about Qualia is it's truly a multivitamin in and of itself. I mean, it's got just about everything. I got rid of so many vitamins that I was taking when I started taking Qualia. I mean, the choline itself, you've got CDP choline, you've got GPC, alpha GPC in there. So you've got the two different forms of choline that have really two different pathways that they work through. But on top of that, they're adding in uridine, which nobody had ever added in uridine. That was one of the things that blew me away about the product. Is I thought that was like some secret thing, that knowing that uridine upregulates the bioavailability of choline in the brain, and nobody was putting it in products. I mean, I think I found one product on the market that was a CDP choline with uridine added to it, but that was the only one I'd ever seen prior to Qualia.
Wow. Yeah, I think someone texted me yesterday. It was my brother, and he said, "Man, I need a multivitamin." And generally, people ask me that. I'm like, I don't know. I never find a multivitamin that has like the right type of compound. Like it's got the wrong B12 that's not bioavailable. There's just not enough stuff. And like when you do like the three, the Qualia, the first bottle, step 1, and then step 2. The first one is more of the, the mental enhancement stuff. And then the second one, those 6 giant ass capsules, those yellow capsules. I mean, like that's actually adequate doses as a multivitamin. So I said, don't worry about the first one if you're not trying to like really turn your brain on and get all geeky with the biohacking stuff. But for a multivitamin, I think like that's probably the best one I've ever seen. And you can, how I judge often too is I typically don't like taking a bunch of capsules, and I also am immune to crappy taste. So I actually take most of my supplements out of the capsules and make drinks out of them, which I also do with Qualia, which I don't recommend if you have a sensitive palate, because it's super intense. But I'll put some stevia in there, and whatever, a drop of like a really strong essential oil like peppermint, just something that overpowers the taste of all those compounds. But I can tell when I do like Qualia, I basically make a powder out of it and just throw it in, one of my crazy biohacker drinks, and I'm like, whoa, like it's so strong tasting. That's how I know that it works. It's like I know there's real shit in there. It's not a bunch of rice powder and like excipients and stuff like that, which a lot of people don't realize. Also, I think that there are a lot of companies use things in the manufacturing process, just in terms of the affordability and the economics of encapsulating things. And there's all sorts of suspect ingredients that go into even some of the like really big brands that I think are otherwise pretty good. So that's something that I notice too when I'm looking at different supplements, is like, okay, cool, the compounds are there, but what else is in there? Most vitamins, you go in the health food store, if you read the ingredients, there's magnesium stearate, there's all these excipients, all these other additives. Even like a lot of the medicinal mushrooms are like mostly the mycelium part. They're not even like the fruiting body. They're basically just like sawdust, and you're paying like $40 a bottle for some mushrooms that really has very little mushroom in it. I could go on. I get frustrated with people when they waste money.
I know.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, you look
industry.
Everybody uses like choline bitartrate, which is like the cheapest form of choline and the least bioavailable of any of them. And that's why I was so impressed by the fact that Qualia had both CDP choline and alpha GPC in it. I mean, the products, one of my favorite products is Bacopa monnieri, and I was taking Bacopa as an individual ingredient. And when I saw, Bacopa monnieri, lion's mane mushroom, mucuna, all in this product, I was just blown away. I mean, that was what sold me when I saw the Bacopa, because very few people understand all the benefits that you get with Bacopa, and that was one that I put almost every one of my clients on.
With those, I guess that's kind of the adaptogen stack, right? Is the Mucuna and Macopa and all of that stuff in there. Even the rhodiola, the lion's mane. Um, those are things again that you typically have to take 5 different pill bottles to get that stuff. You know, it's like
Right.
it is a pain in the ass kind of piecing it all together. It's also difficult. I'm sure you've experienced working with clients and me coaching. It's like, all right, I have to make someone a list of like the 10 top, adaptogens, and then which company to get which one from so you don't get ripped off. And it ends up being
Yeah.
a pretty convoluted process. So it's cool when you can sort of find, really carefully sourced extracts of those things that are all in one place. Um, so there's one thing that I have experimented with, and that is lithium orotate. And I've taken that at different times, and I noticed that was one of the ingredients on kind of the neuromineral side of Qualia. And then
Yeah.
there's a lot of sort of counter information online, and you never know who's trolling and who really knows their shit. But I've heard things like, oh, lithium orotate puts holes in your brain, and like that it's really dangerous and all this stuff. Have you looked into that particular compound at all in terms of its efficiency or risks involved?
Yeah, it's interesting because that was one of the first products, or one of the first ingredients I saw in there, and I said, "Whoa, I don't know about this." I mean, I knew a lot of people that took low dose lithium, and for health reasons, for cognitive enhancement, and I thought, I don't want to go there, but I realized that was my cognitive bias and what I learned in medicine, and I was like, oh, lithium, that's a bipolar treatment. It can't be good for you, but it's got really great neuroprotective abilities at these low doses, and you really don't find many people that have negative reactions to lithium orotate. I mean, it's just uh, it's a good overall kind of membrane stabilizer, neuroprotective component that, you know, I looked at all the research that they had on it, and it was all very positive research, very minimal in the way of negative. And I can tell you, their white paper on this stuff, I mean, they sent that to me, and it was like 187 pages long and single-spaced research articles on every single one of these things. and I've been through most of it, but overall, I mean, people, before you jump on what you read on health websites, I mean, number one, almost every health-based website that is marketing fear is typically marketing. They're not there to provide you information. They're trying to sell something or themselves. Um, you got to look into the background on this. I mean, I see so many people, is your doctor messing you up with your thyroid medication, or, is Lyme disease killing you? This is fear-based stuff, and it's all about, you can reach people either through fear or excitement, and it's harder to reach them through excitement. So a lot of the marketers focus on fear-based marketing, and I am just not a fan of that. And I think that they may have good intentions, but you're just feeding that sick, that people attach to that illness. They attach to that, and we try to disconnect. I mean, in my medical practice, we don't even use diagnosis codes. I mean, somebody may say, well, I'm a diabetic. I say, no, you're not diabetic. You have insulin resistance relating to your lifestyle. And suddenly it becomes something that can be reversed with lifestyle changes, rather than saying, oh, I need medication and I have a disease that I'm sick with.
Dude,
Um,
that's so good, Dan. That's like the NLP piece of health, right? I
yeah,
always resist the fact, like, if I find myself, which is rare, thank God, but oh, I'm getting a cold. I'm like, what is a cold? That's not even a fucking thing. It's like a
yeah,
made up thing. So I would say, like, yeah, I'm having some issues with my breathing, or I'm having a little mucus or whatever. I'll maybe like kind of identify the symptom, but I personally will never say I have this or that. Like I used to always say, oh, I have a bad back. It's like, God, I probably have a bad back from 20 years of telling people I have a bad back. I'm like
Yeah.
compounding that in the subconscious mind of like, oh, I'm a person with a bad back. So I've had to really tweak my languaging too. Like, oh, sometimes I experience an uncomfortable feeling in the lower portion of my spine. You know, it's like, it's very long-winded at times and a bit more laborious to explain, but I really don't want to label anything. And the late, great Dr. David Hawkins, who was a really just a brilliant physician, a psychiatrist for 50 years, you know, and became a spiritual teacher. He has a book on healing, and that's one of the top messages in his book. He said, do not label any of your symptoms as a disease. Don't give it a name, because then you're giving it this undue power, right? Because you then have this mental construct. And I like what you said about it's easy for the psyche to become attached with being a sick person, or I have this disease, or I am a cancer survivor, or this or that. It's like the ego likes to kind of grab onto some sort of label and self-identify and become locked in that paradigm. And I believe that there's just so much power in our thought. So I appreciate that point of view. There was one other one too that I wanted to cover in the neurominerals, and that one is something that just about anyone, like vitamin D3, that if you go get tested, you're going to come up deficient in just living our modern lifestyle, and that is magnesium. And this is another one of those sort of, I don't know if it's a supplement scam, but I'm sure if you're a manufacturer of magnesium, some forms are cheaper than others. And so I go to the health food store and see a whole rack of magnesium supplements, and I, based on my research, have found that many of them are not even bioavailable and don't cross the blood-brain barrier. So you're not really deriving the benefit from that magnesium that we would have at some point gotten from our diet if you go back in evolution. But of course the soil is depleted, so the plants that we eat aren't uptaking magnesium from the soil, etc. It's this cascade of deficiency. So I saw in Qualia that there's magnesium threonate, which I've heard is one of the good ones because it's able to actually, you're able to assimilate it and cross the blood-brain barrier. What's your take on magnesium deficiency and how to actually get your levels up? And are some of the versions of magnesium basically just expensive pee?
Well, the magnesium itself, I mean, there's a lot of health benefits to magnesium, and it's another one of those micronutrients that are highly deficient, especially in the U.S. population. It's not something that even taking a multivitamin is going to give you adequate amounts typically of magnesium. Now, taking 9 pills with Qualia, you actually get adequate amounts of magnesium through the threonate. But I focus it on two things. I find that most people that I test are deficient in magnesium, and I also run their genetics, and they tend to carry genes that indicate, a lot of urinary loss or decreased absorption of magnesium from the gut. But I like magnesium glycinate for people with sleep issues. So I have them take the magnesium glycinate at night, and that way they get the glycine plus the magnesium. So they kind of a double hit on that. Now the threonate is great for cognitive performance because it is one of the most highly absorbed forms in the brain to cross the blood-brain barrier. So you're going to really get it across. And the idea of magnesium in that sense is that it's a cofactor in so many reactions that it just provides that substrate that we need to optimize these functions.
And does not the magnesium help to balance out the overabundance of calcium that we sometimes get? I mean, just on a bioelectrical level. And I'm not a scientific guy, but I look at things in a very broad, sort of nature-based, common sense approach. And to me, those minerals sort of counterbalance one another, and we have an overabundance of calcium, which most people think we're deficient in, and yet we're deficient in magnesium. Is there some truth to that?
Yeah, I don't, I can't remember the last time I put anybody on calcium. Honestly, it's just not been an issue, and I see bone density go up every year with my clients. But we use a lot of vitamin D3. We use K2. Those tend to be the ones.
Yeah. So the fat soluble ones. So D3, K2, vitamin A, right?
Yeah, and you got to watch vitamin A because some people can't convert beta carotene very well to palmitic or into the retinol esters. So you've got to, sometimes you don't want to look at a multivitamin that's pure beta carotene, you want kind of a mix of palmitate and beta carotene in the vitamin A sourcing in
Well,
most
is it?
cases.
That's the thing. People think well, I just eat a bunch of carrot juice and you're getting like, 42 grams of sugar in a fucking carrot juice, and you think you're getting your vitamin A and the carotene, but I've heard that it's very difficult to actually, it's not bioavailable vitamin A, whereas if you eat, like I eat raw egg yolks, copious amounts of them all the time, and I haven't been tested for my vitamin A levels, or I don't even know if there is a test for that, but I feel like I'm probably getting adequate, fat soluble vitamin A in its digestible, assimilatable form from those pastured eggs. Would you say that's a good way to just make sure you're getting it in?
Well, the eggs are going to have a little bit of the retinol esters in them, whereas vegetable sources are going to have all beta carotene. And there's a gene called BCM01 that has to do with the absorption of beta carotene, the conversion of beta carotene into the retinoic acids. That's the usable form. It's great to have a bunch of beta carotene because it is that body's supply, that storage that when they need it, the body can convert it into the retinol esters. But some people have genes that are deficient in that. Now, one of the things I have noticed is that when I take vitamins that have high doses of beta carotene, if I haven't taken a multivitamin in a while and I start taking it, I don't notice anything, but then after a couple of days, my urine gets bright orange after taking the multivitamin. That's that extra beta carotene that I no longer need, the extra that starts coming out in the urine. So we're peeing off the unused portion of the beta carotene. But you've also got to understand that there are people with genetics that require two forms of the beta carotene,
Oh, okay.
or two forms of the vitamin A rather than just pure beta carotene.
Right. Would you advise against drinking like a 32-ouncer of carrot juice, though? Based on the sugar content, or is that just me?
Yeah, that's probably, I don't like to drink any calories. That kind of goes against my philosophy. And juicing, you tend to, I don't purpose of juicing, it depends on what your purpose is, but if you're doing it to get your vitamins and nutrients, I think you can do better by taking a multivitamin and eating the vegetables and the fruits.
Yeah, I think over the year, when I first started on this journey, I was really big on fasting and juicing. I would do sugar-free green juices, cold press, like the whole deal. They've become very popular. This is going back, 20 years now almost. But I find that the juicing, provided they're low sugar juices, are pretty decent if you're on like a detox protocol for a period of time. But what I prefer is actually making green smoothies so that I get the fiber in there, because I just feel, I don't know, just my body tells me I want to assimilate that stuff more slowly, and I also want to get some fats in there, like I get avocado and just a lot of fiber, and that the green vegetables become more of a meal. Whereas
Yeah.
if I'm just pounding green juices all the time, I don't know, it's like it feels like I get a little bit out of homeostasis. Like if I feel really acidic because I've been eating tons of meat or just traveling a lot, green juice is like my body's like, yes. But if I'm already kind of balanced feeling and then I'm doing a lot of those juices, it's sort of, I start feeling a little bit funky. It's like a little, I don't know, it's just too unnatural. Would you kind of subscribe to that school of thought? That
Well,
there's a
that's
time
what
and a place for it?
we tell every one of our clients, listen to your body, and we teach them to start listening to their body because we've gotten out of the habit of that. We listen to the media and not to our body. So, when you wake up in the morning, are you hungry? Well, if you're not hungry, don't eat. If your body is not telling you to eat, don't eat because it's healthy for you to eat at that time. So when we get the body into kind of an ideal homeostasis, whatever they're experiencing, they should start really getting interoceptive about it and understanding what these feelings are. I mean, when you look at professional athletes and you look at like special forces soldiers, they constantly are in this interoceptive state where they're monitoring their function to see what their limits are and what they have left in the tank. It's one of the big differences you see between professional athletes and recreational athletes. Is they know how much reserve they have. Same with special forces soldiers. They have this interoceptive ability to really sense, yeah, I'm in this sprint, but if I have to go further, I'm going to have to drop back a little bit in order to keep going. Or I'm almost there. I've got this much left in the tank. I'm going to really crank it out. So they have this whole ability to sense the inner milieu of the body. And we try to teach people to start paying attention to that. And I mean, you can do it in kind of body scanning meditation and help to learn that process. But it's more about really starting to listen to the body. If you feel good about those smoothies, then they're probably doing well for you. But I also like to set up biometrics for people to test. So, are we seeing an improvement in sleep patterns? Are we seeing an improvement in HRV? Are we seeing lower inflammatory markers in the blood? Is your body composition improving? Figure out what you need to have a measurable biometric to assess whether what you're doing and the purpose you're doing it for is achieving that outcome. Because like I said earlier, we convince ourselves that these things work quick. I mean, it's a very common thing that we want to convince ourselves that we're right, and we will ignore the true objective data in that regard.
Well said. Pause for 1 second, Dan.
Okay.
The leaf blowers just arrived. I'm like, I didn't put my my sound baffling on the windows because I didn't think it came on Wednesdays. Give me 1 second. Let me just soundproof us real quick.
Okay.
Stand by. Oh, Lord. What usually happens, though, if this happens is, hey, check this out, dude.
I was wondering what that was.
Yeah, man, I got my, it's called a Juve, and it is red LED light therapy. It's really fantastic. I would have it on during the whole recording, but it has a fan. It makes a bit of noise. But it's pretty cool, because you mentioned light before. I thought you might get a kick out of that. It's just, massive mitochondria blaster, and it has all kinds of crazy benefits. I'm really enjoying it. I do it twice a day for about 10 minutes a day.
Yeah.
And it also forces me to lift weights because you got to stand in front of it naked. And I'm not good at working out. So I'll just sit here and do curls for 10 minutes or play with my kettlebell or whatever. It's a pretty cool little gadget I just got.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and then on the other side of the room, there's an infrared sauna. So between the two of those, I got it pretty well dialed. And right on cue, as soon as I put up the sound baffling, they're done.
They're done.
God damn it, that is too funny. Hang on 1 second. When I put the sound baffling, then it tends to kill the light. I guess in the future, I just have to know. All right, just pause for a second. Show the guest your cool red light thing and keep it pushing. All right, sounds quiet enough. So we'll just edit that part out. Maybe not of the video though, because it's kind of funny. And we'll just go for a few more minutes here. So thanks for that perspective, Dan. I really appreciate the kind of holistic view that you have on all this stuff. But I do want to jump back to one vitamin or supplement that you mentioned that I think a lot of people are still not aware of, and that's K2. What's up with vitamin K2?
Well, K2 really assists with the absorption of vitamin D. And the body can make some K2, but it makes short chain K2, and it's not very effective in its utilization in the body. We can get it from some of the bacteria in our gut. We can get it from some of the meat sources, so more of animal sources that we get it from. But I recommend people to actually supplement K2. And you're talking about I think it's MK7 through 10 are the longer chain ones that they're finding much better health outcomes with that. In fact, it has something to do with assisting the transport of fats in the body. And they're finding that people with the ApoE4 variant that leads to higher risk for Alzheimer's disease, they're finding that supplementing with K2 is actually giving beneficial outcomes from that standpoint. So, it's got quite a bit of very positive qualities to it. And we have a lot of people that are taking just vitamin K by itself, and it just doesn't get converted into the K2 very well.
Right. Yeah, I think I first heard about it from the work of Dr. Weston Price. And this is going back into this ancestral diet, and when he went around the world and studied these indigenous people that all had perfect teeth and perfect health and didn't have any of these degenerative diseases that we have now, he found that their diets were typically rich in that particular compound, and then we kind of were missing that. So it's an interesting one, and I love getting those more obscure things on the show because that can really impact someone's health, especially if they're, eating a vegetarian or vegan diet, and something you can supplement. The way that I used to get K2 was from this food called natto. Have you ever tried natto?
It's got the highest amount of K2 of any food source.
Right. It also
Yeah.
tastes and smells like feet that have been soaking in a porta potty for the past month.
Yeah.
I was living with a girlfriend, and I was ordering the best natto from this company in San Francisco. I'll put it in the show notes. I'll remember what it is. I don't remember the name, but I researched a lot to find the non-GMO soy, because it's a fermented soybean, and soy is like, not a food that I would typically eat, but when it's fermented, you kind of make it safe. But I would crack one. We lived in this huge house. It was 3 levels, and I'd be up in the kitchen on the top level, and I would open the little container of natto, and I'd hear her 5 minutes later, she'd be screaming like, "Ew, gross, eat that outside." It like literally would smell like 1,000 people walked into your house and took off their sweaty socks and just put their feet up. It's the weirdest food, but it's definitely an acquired taste, so much easier to supplement your K2. Okay, so a couple last things I wanted to cover here, because I think we've really gotten some good stuff in terms of the mental performance and some of the ways that we can integrate some of these compounds, which is huge. However, I do want to cover sleep and see if you have just, some rapid fire tips, because I've hacked my sleep a lot, especially in terms of just the sleep environment. But from a supplementation standpoint, do you have any tricks up your sleeve in terms of what one might want to take? You mentioned a certain form of magnesium. Is there anything else that you can use that really knock your ass out, especially for those of us living in a city that needs some extra input there?
Yeah, I mean, we actually run genetics and understand, chronotypes, because a lot of people just don't match their chronotype. Um, our lifestyle may make us want to have a particular chronotype, but if our genetics don't dictate that, then it's hard to do that, because you get something called social jet lag, and it just throws your whole circadian system off. We focus on light and all this, but if you're a delayed phase sleep person, you're going to be going to bed at 1 or 2 in the morning and waking up at 10. And if you get a job that requires you to be there at 8 a.m., you're going to chronically have problems, and so you need to kind of adjust your lifestyle to accommodate.
You just described the struggle of the past 47 years. I hit my peak flow state at around 11 p.m., 12 a.m. I don't get tired until 1:30 a.m. 2 o'clock, I'm like, okay, I should really go to bed. Here's the thing that sucks, though, because I do like morning sun gazing, I do ice baths, I do the red light therapy, I do all kinds of things that sort of put me in sync with nature. I sleep grounded. I'm on a grounding pad right here. I do everything I can to be in sync with the lunar and solar cycles. So what happens is I'm still not tired until 1 in the morning, but I can't sleep in past like 7:30 or 8 tops. 8 o'clock, I'm wide awake. So I really can't get a sufficient amount of sleep, which for me is like a minimum of 7 hours. Optimal would be 8 to 8.5 hours. That's how I really function. So would you explain what a chronotype is? Because you just described mine. It sounds like one of those, like a cronut, like a donut, but deep fried and more delicious. What is a chronotype?
Chronotype is your biologic clock. It's basically, some people are set to be night owls, some people morning larks, some people are in between. And typically it's hard to shift a chronotype. It's really based on the sun. And what happens is you get your melatonin released early, you get released later. It varies by the individual. But even really pushing the epigenetics of trying to shift the expression of those genes is really hard. And so we get this social mismatch with our chronotype, and it causes the social jet lag. It's a very common thing that we see, because most people are morning larks, but there are a few people that are night owls. Now, some of them will tell me they're night owls, but they're up playing video games at night, because that's the time when all the gamers are online. And so they like to think that they're night owls, but genetically speaking, they're the morning lark. And when we shift them to say, okay, start going to bed at 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night, and try it for a month, and no alarms. So none of my clients, I tell all my clients, no alarms at all. You pick for setting up sleep hygiene, you pick a specific time that you're going to go to bed. So based on when you typically wake up, make sure that you've got 8 hours by the time your head hits the pillow to the time you wake up. We focus on really hygiene, lowering the temperature in the room, blackout curtains, no electronics in the room, no blue light within 2 hours of bed, all of those things. So we kind of optimize those functions. Now, if we need to move into things that can boost sleep, then we're talking about magnesium glycinate. We'll have them put lavender on their pillow, or lavender and chamomile essential oils work really well for shifting expression of those genes.
That's interesting, because I dated another girl who used to have this like lavender essential oil spray, and she would, it smelled really nice, but she would insist on spraying that on the pillows every night, and it would like hit me in the face. It was really annoying, but I liked the smell. But I was always like, oh, okay, I'll humor you, but I'm like, that doesn't do shit. There's no way that like helps you sleep, but there is some data there to support that.
Yeah, and some people will take it and they'll take shea butter, and they'll mix the chamomile and the lavender in the shea butter and rub it on their chest, so that they get that scent releasing during the night.
Cool.
But other things like one of the research chemicals, phenibut. Phenibut works wonders for sleep. I have a lot of people that do really well with phenibut. Melatonin, another one that works really well for inducing sleep.
I want to back you up there to the phenibut. That's like one of my top supplements. I don't know if you can classify it as a supplement. I take it during the daytime. It just puts me in the best mood. It's just like I'm so happy when I'm on it. Now that one, for me, I wouldn't say I've ever been risking being addicted to it, because it's not that strong, but it's definitely something that I'll find myself wanting to take more often, because I really love the feeling. But I tend to stagger that one, where maybe I do it once or twice a week, or I sort of save it for special occasions. Do you think there's any risk in taking phenibut on a ongoing basis, like a daily basis or anything like that?
I recommend breaks from about everything over time, just because the body will get into that homeostatic state and be adjusted now to say, okay, well, I really like this and this is where I am. So if you don't take it, then you're going to drop out of that state. So it's just like with Qualia. I do recommend everybody do either 20 days on and 10 days off, or they do 5 days on and 2 days off. Just so that they can take a break from it. We need to take a break from all these things so that our body doesn't get into that zone of saying, now I need to adjust. So it just keeps it in that comfort zone.
Is there a risk with taking melatonin in terms of your body down-regulating its own production? Say if you're giving your brain melatonin from a pill or from some supplement, then your brain's like, okay, cool, well, that's taken care of. We don't need to make that shit anymore, and causing you to sort of become dependent on it?
That's one thing that they have researched and they have not found to happen. Taking supplemental melatonin does not inhibit your own production. It's just not one of the issues. One of the major things I see is that people think, well, if I take 3 milligrams, now if I take 6, it'll be even better. And what will happen
up the next morning.
Right. Chronically taking more than 3 milligrams on a daily basis or a nightly basis, there are some incidents of depression and daytime sleepiness that occurs with that. And there's enzymes. The same enzyme that breaks down caffeine breaks down melatonin. Wow. So you've got to pay attention to that as well.
Cool. Awesome. And then moving on from sleep, do you have any recommendations in terms of travel and jet lag? I'm sure you, as someone that travels a lot, and I just get completely devastated by flying, and it's something I'm always working on optimizing and helping coaching clients overcome that have similar experiences. Anything you might recommend there, supplement or even environmentally wise?
Yeah, some people are really prone to suffering from jet lag issues, especially when they travel from east to west. That seems to be the biggest impact rather than the opposite way. But some people are more sensitive to that and can take, generally each time zone, depending on your genetics, you can take a full day for each time zone change to adjust. I like to really kind of hack that. And so I will take something for assisting me to fall asleep either on the plane or immediately when I get there to match the time zone as close as I can. And then when I wake up in the morning, a little glass, an 8-ounce glass of water with some sea salt in it to kick the cortisol in. So you drink that down, activates the adrenals, kicks up cortisol. It helps to rapidly shift that bodily physiology to that new time zone if you can time it right.
Awesome, that's good. Yeah, I do the sea salt thing just about every morning in some water, and I don't know, I didn't know why exactly. I heard something about the adrenals, but I didn't know about the cortisol release. That's cool. That's good to know. I just find that it wakes me up really fast.
Yeah.
So cool. That's awesome. All right. Well, I think that pretty much covers everything that I wanted to talk to you about today. I mean, I think we could go on and on because you're a wealth of information, but that's a really good introduction, I think, to some of the different compounds that can affect you mentally and just other lifestyle things. Is there anything that you'd like to add as general practice for someone who wants better memory, focus, creativity, flow states, all of these, intelligence, overall intelligence, as you put it?
Well, I think the key is to don't look at very directed specific things. Look at everything. If you're not sleeping well, forget trying to get better focus. It's just not going to happen. You've got to get the whole body. If you're not eating healthy foods, if you're eating a lot of crap nutrition, then you can go to the gym and work out as hard as you want. You can take your steroids. You can take all of these performance enhancing supplements, but you're not going to get much success in the long term, and your overall health is not going to be optimized. Same thing with neuroperformance. I mean, neuroperformance requires good sleep, good environmental habits, good nutritional habits, good exercise habits. Think of the body as that system that needs to be optimized rather than, hey, you got a slow leak in the tire, and instead of taking it in and replacing the tire, you're just filling the tire up every so often. It just doesn't work that way.
I love it. Okay, so in closing, the systems approach, think of your whole biology and whole sense of self as a system rather than trying to isolate and fix, symptomatic issues that are coming up.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, love it. I'm on board with that 100%. Okay, so my final question to you, Dan, is you've taught me so much today. You're a wealth of information. You've taught the listeners a bunch of stuff. Who have been 3 great teachers or teachings in your life that we might look to sort of up the food chain from you? Could be a person, a book, a philosophy, anything.
It's hard to isolate that down to even a specific. I don't read books. I listen to audiobooks, and I listen to probably 10 a month, different audiobooks, and I take pieces from everybody. So I find that I can learn something from everybody that I interact with, and I think that's the key, is to actually take those pieces and integrate it into your own philosophy of things, rather than adopt someone's philosophy and use it as gospel. Just take it all in, see what makes sense to you, and put it together to create optimal outcomes.
Awesome. All right. Well, you're going to be one of those pieces for our listeners then, because they're putting together every Tuesday, they're putting together a different piece of the puzzle in different areas of expertise. So thank you for your contribution. So you've
Awesome.
got a podcast, you got various websites. Where do you want people to go find more of you and your work?
You can go to apeironcenter.com. It's APEIRON center.com, and Peiron is Greek for limitless, and because we see the human potential as being limitless, and that's where we're all heading.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. So thanks, man, for being on the show. This is an amazing conversation. I love to geek out on this shit, and I appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge and experience with me and our listeners.
That was a lot of fun, Luke.